Greetings, traveler. My name is Sir Belgard, and I am the last knight. This is my first tale to thee. The first of many, I hope. Should thy heart prove brave and thy mind keen, tonight I shall recount 3 curse chronicles. These are no idle fancies, but echoes of truth, drawn from the vaults of old. So steel your spirit. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more magical tales. And let us begin. The world of Thornspire is one steeped in dread and wonder, where sinister thoughts linger beyond sleep, becoming an insidious presence known as Miasma. Born of nightmares and dark imaginings, Miasma hovers invisibly, corrupting minds, tainting souls, and poisoning the very land itself. Unchecked, it breeds madness, manifesting in plagues, wars, hysteria, and delusions that can topple kingdoms and shatter lives. Artists, painters, sculptors, poets, and singers alone possess the rare talent to capture and seal these destructive forces within their works. Their creations become vessels, imprisoning the miasma and transforming chaos into hauntingly beautiful art. Yet these works are jealously guarded by rulers and clergy, who use them as tools of power and profit, controlling the populace by regulating access to their soothing influence. But should these artworks be carelessly exposed to active miasma, they birth demons, monstrous beings whose lifeblood, when distilled into a potent elixir known as sake, grants extended life. Thus, rulers deliberately sustain a delicate balance of misery, ensuring their immortality at the cost of perpetual suffering. Ira is one of the few born with resonance, an extraordinary and perilous ability to sense and interact directly with trapped miasma. Persecuted by the Church, which fears her power and the threat she poses to their carefully maintained equilibrium, Ira has been hunted relentlessly. The Church's arthounds, corrupted trackers twisted by miasma, pursue her ceaselessly, determined to silence or harness her gift. In ages past, Thornspire Cathedral stood resplendent, its spires piercing the heavens like mighty swords thrust skyward in defiance or reverence, none now can say. Beneath its vaulted ceilings, sunlight once poured through rose-tinted glass, blessing the faithful who knelt reverently at its gilded altars. Now, the cathedral lay shattered, a skeletal husk haunted by sorrow. Its broken rose windows, once radiant, spilled distorted hues upon fractured marble and shattered stone. Each fractured pane cast mournful shades of crimson and gold, pooling like spilled blood upon the desecrated floor. At the heart of Thornspire lay the ancient altar, gouged by nails and swords wielded in madness. It was here that sermons twisted by miasma had spilled forth in venomous torrents, driving entire congregations to claw desperately at their eyes and ears, seeking escape from truths too hideous to bear. Scars of that dreadful past were etched indelibly upon every stone, each gouge and scratch a silent, ghastly testament. Into this forsaken sanctuary staggered Ira, her breast ragged, pain searing from wounds inflicted by relentless arthounds. Blood seeped through the torn fabric of her cloak, leaving a trail across the cathedral's once sacred stones. As Ira moved further into the ruined sanctuary, the air thickened, vibrating strangely around her. Her resonance stirred violently within her, bringing forth sorrowful echoes of lost choral hymns trapped for generations. Ancient laments emerged from their confinement, caressing her skin painfully, mournful harmonies so intense that tears welled uncontrollably from her eyes. Her strength finally gave out, and she collapsed before the desecrated altar. Through blurred sight, she watched a figure step silently from the shadows, feeling rather than hearing his quiet approach. Saren, known only as the Blind Keeper, moved with deliberate care. His sightless eyes stared blankly ahead, but his bare feet delicately touched the stones, sensing disturbances within the miasma. He paused, feeling the subtle disruption Ira's presence caused, a ripple of chaos in the carefully tended currents of darkness. "You are rare," he murmured softly, his voice resonant in the suffocating silence. "And dangerous." With practiced certainty, he knelt beside Ira, gently taking her arm and guiding her to her feet. His touch was cold yet strangely comforting. Leading her behind the altar to a niche carved in shadow, he grasped a hidden lever, fashioned crudely from ancient bone. With a groan, the stones parted, revealing a dark spiral stairway that descended into unseen depths. Silence emanated from below, a profound stillness, untouched by time or turmoil. Saren leaned close, his voice a breath of ancient secrets against her ear. "Not all saints are remembered," he whispered gravely. "Some were sealed." As Ira peered into the waiting darkness below, her heart quickened with dread and anticipation. She stepped forward, knowing there was no turning back. Descending into the depths, Ira emerged into the vestibule, a chamber dimly lit by lamps fed with low-grade sake oil, casting wavering shadows along iron sconces set into walls streaked with dried miasma. The chamber was bare and hauntingly silent, lined with shelves holding untouched canvases, bundled scrolls, and half-formed clay figurines, frozen mid-creation. Dust floated in the stale air, swirling lazily like suspended ash. Kel, a mute boy who served the keeper, quietly found a scrap of charcoal and traced a laughing face upon the wall. Moments later, to Ira's horrified fascination, the face twisted slowly into a grotesque frown. Alarmed, Saren swiftly snatched the charcoal away, crushing it beneath his heel. "Even joy turns," he said solemnly, voice heavy with sorrow. "Here, the air bends everything." This room served as preparation for those descending further. Shelves housed protective charms, blindfolds intricately woven from demon hair threads, and the Book of Forgotten Colors, a forbidden tome cataloging pigments banned for their violent reactions to ambient miasma. The hall stretched in a long, oppressive line, walls of carved stone and limestone streaked darkly by years of sweat and despair. Alcoves lined the passage, each a crypt-like recess housing forbidden artworks. Chained canvases shivered slightly, as if breathing softly beneath their bindings. Torn paintings twitched erratically, edges fluttering like the broken wings of dying birds. Sculptures rested inside glass caskets, their inner surfaces misted by the breath of trapped horrors. An unnatural chill pervaded, a coldness that consumed warmth and hope alike. Ira stopped before a painting, a blood-red moon looming over a shadowy forest path. With each blink, it shifted subtly, beckoning her down a path of desolate solitude. "This one?" Ira whispered. Saren paused, troubled. The artist never finished the moon. His unresolved grief left it hungry. Kel gently touched a sculpture, a child curled tightly in sorrow. The stone felt warm, disturbingly alive. He sketched a fleeting smile on his slate that vanished too swiftly for Ira's eyes. Saren approached, breast shallow, haunted by whispers of his own name, wrapped in forgotten poetry. His voice trembled as he spoke softly to Ira. "You sense what others cannot, Ira. I brought you here because your resonance can end this curse. Miasma could be harnessed, transformed into something pure, used to heal rather than harm. You alone possess this power." Ira met his gaze, uncertain yet resolute. "And how? How do we destroy the miasma's influence forever?" Saren's voice hardened. "By confronting it fully. By taking the unfinished grief, the buried fears, all that feeds this darkness, and turning it into light. Your art can achieve this, Ira. But you must be brave." The keeper's low chant echoed, calming the restless spirits. "We hold them, still. We do not own. They breathe beneath. We walk alone." The descent led them into the choir vault, a place where sound behaved unnaturally, distorted by the ancient stones themselves. No paintings or sculptures adorned this chamber, only strange musical instruments, intricate music boxes, scrolls bound tightly to silence their captured sounds, and peculiar sculptures designed to emit eerie tones when touched. A faint hum vibrated constantly in the air, an unsettling resonance without any discernible source. At the chamber's center lay a shattered harp, forlorn and damaged. A single string remained taut and intact. Saren approached cautiously, and with hesitant curiosity, plucked the string. A wretched sob, startlingly human and achingly sorrowful, filled the chamber. Ira recoiled, eyes wide with shock and empathy. In another corner stood a tuning fork encased within a crystal tube, trembling silently yet violently enough to induce dizziness and a trickle of blood from the nostrils of anyone venturing too near. Saren watched their discomfort with sadness. Music, he explained softly, was once believed the purest method to trap and soothe miasma. But it proved too powerful, too uncontrollable. Its very purity turned dangerous, awakening depths of despair that could fracture minds and souls alike. Ira's voice was tight as she asked, "Can it be undone, Saren? Can we reclaim music's power safely?" Saren stared thoughtfully at the sobbing harp, his voice somber yet determined. "Only someone like you, Ira. Your resonance can cleanse it. If harnessed correctly, music could purify miasma, healing the land rather than poisoning it. But it requires sacrifice, bravery, and a willingness to face the sorrow locked within each note." Ira took a deep, steadying breath, her decision forming resolutely. "Then let us begin. If there is hope, it lies in the harmony beneath the discord." The keeper's voice was barely audible, humming a soothing melody, seeking to calm the room's restless, aching air. The final chamber lay beneath all others, the Black Room. Vast, dome-shaped, circular in form and silent as a tomb. The silence here had weight, a hush so complete that one could hear the shifting of their own blood. 7 massive alcoves ringed the walls like slumbering sentinels, but only 6 were filled. Each held a veil, a legendary artwork known to purge or unleash civilization-breaking miasma. Each veil was shrouded behind a wrought iron curtain etched with red wax seals and esoteric glyphs, trembling faintly in still air. At the chamber's center rose a dais, a viewing platform designed for one soul alone. Communal witnessing was forbidden, the veils reflected emotion, and shared perception could unravel minds or ignite widespread reaction. It was said that one veil misused could plunge cities into silence. The artworks pulsed with awful silence. Approaching them triggered phantom sensations, heat, nausea, weeping guilt, aching loneliness, forbidden ecstasy. Ira passed each with reverent caution until she came to the 6th. Its alcove's base was stained pitch black, as if something once clawed from it, but failed. Before the empty 7th alcove stood the keeper. His hands trembled. His blind eyes glistened. "I painted it," he said. "But I was not the last to see it." With shaking breath, he confessed, once, long ago, he gave the 7th veil to the royal court, believing it too pure to remain hidden. He thought it would be revered. Instead, it was taken by Lady Mavelin, who used it as her confessional, her sanctuary, her prison. She fed it with every act of cruelty, every silent betrayal, until it became a monument to unacknowledged sin. "The 7th veil doesn't show a demon," Saren whispered. "It shows the first moment in history we chose to ignore someone's pain." Suddenly, the iron beneath Ira's feet pulsed. The 7th veil had returned. The chamber began to quake, not from violence, but from recognition. Ira stepped onto the dais. As she did, the iron curtains before each alcove shivered and began to rise. One by one, the veils unveiled themselves, not with screams, but with memories. Pain viewed through another's eyes. Betrayals whispered in locked bedrooms. Grief drowned in laughter. Regret twisted into weaponry. Each veil became a mirror. Each reflection showed not horror, but unspoken humanity. When Ira turned to the 7th veil, she was no longer in the Black Room. A vision overtook her, so vivid it stole the breath from her lungs. She stood barefoot in the dust of memory, watching herself as a child, small, scared, her fingers twitching as they traced unknowable symbols in the ash. She remembered that moment, her first resonance, when the miasma had flooded her veins like fire and ice. It had whispered not in words but in aches. And standing before the child was a figure, thin as a reed, with long purple hair cascading like liquid shadow, her eyes vast pools of blue, hollowed by centuries of weariness. The air around her shimmered with sorrow. "Ira," the girl said. Her voice was barely a murmur, like the last breath before sleep. "You must burn this place. You must end me." "Who are you?" Ira asked, though she knew. "I am the wound they refuse to heal," the girl said. "The silence in every song. The brushstroke that trembled. I am the miasma, and I was born from your world's refusal to feel. The girl stepped forward, placing a hand on Ira's chest. If you destroy the gallery, I will vanish. Art will be safe again. But the demons will scatter. Some will survive. They will hide in dreams, in despair. You will need to hunt them. Alone. Without end. Ira felt her heart twist, not with fear, but with knowing. Will it hurt? Yes, the girl said and smiled. But it will be honest. Tears ran down Ira's cheeks as she whispered, so be it. The vision shattered like glass struck by wind. Flames surged. The gallery ignited, not chaotically, but with solemn purpose, like a pyre built from memory. The curtains flared, the veils crackled. And still Ira stood, silent as stone, until Saren seized her hand. They ran, through crumbling corridors, past the veils now ablaze, smoke twisting like sorrow into the air. But Kell, dear, brave Kell, remained. He had drawn a circle upon the floor, precise and childlike. Within it he stood humming. It was the melody Ira had once sung. He looked up and smiled, not with fear, but with peace. I'll hold it, his eyes said. Just this once. As marble cracked and fire roared, Saren cast aside his badge, metal clanging against stone, a sound sharper than any scream. The keeper wept. Not for loss, but for release. And above them, the ceiling split, not into ruin, but into starlight. Tears ran down Ira's cheeks as she whispered, so be it. The vision shattered like glass struck by wind. But there was one task yet unfinished. We must find the painting, Saren said urgently. The one Mavlin kept hidden. The one that still breathes. Now Saren and Ira had to complete one last task in order to finally destroy Miasma to the palace to find the painting Saren had once surrendered to Lady Mavlin. They traveled by night, cloaked by fog and false names, through alleys only thieves remembered. In the slums, they met Greta, Split-Eye, a once-renowned soprano-turned-smuggler, who granted them passage through the city's forgotten aqueducts. Emerging beneath the palace kitchen, they climbed through wine cellars stacked with sake and relics. On the first floor, they encountered the sommelier guards, vintners-turned-watchers who had been fed on sake fumes for decades. Their senses were dulled but their strength immense. Ira and Saren lured them into a trap, knocking barrels free and igniting a stream of sake to create an explosion that sealed the entrance. The second floor housed the Hall of Fragrance, a gallery of scent-bound memories. The air shimmered with illusions, false images of lost loved ones and forgotten joys. Saren had to bind Ira's eyes as voices whispered seductively from every corner. They moved in darkness, relying only on their trust and memory of Greta's map to pass unseen. On the third floor, masked curators circled beneath mirrored ceilings, tending to cursed relics that whispered and hummed. Ira unfurled a false veil that projected a scene of terror, a mock demon devouring a crown. In the confusion, Saren moved like a silent storm, disabling the guards and smashing the mirrors to destroy the relic's power. The fourth floor, the Chamber of Aria, resounded with the voices of the past. Living echoes of royal choirs drifted through halls lined with musical traps. Ira and Saren had to cross in perfect silence, avoiding dissonant tiles that screamed when touched. At the end of this passage, they were confronted by a former court bard, now a monstrous echo construct of himself. Saren defeated it with a sword tuned to his own heartbeat. Finally, in the upper sanctum, beneath a dome of black obsidian, they encountered Madame Mavlin, draped in dark silks, surrounded by demons' pawn whispering secrets, and threading tapestries from strands of miasma. She stood before the cursed painting, Saren's lost masterpiece, altered by years of silent feeding. "You've come for it," she said with a smirk. "But it already knows you." Then came battle, swords, claws, and howls. Shadows peeled from the walls, taking monstrous forms. One demon wore Saren's old face, twisted by pride. Another whispered Ira's childhood fears in her mother's voice. Saren fought like a tempest, dueling not just monsters but the regrets of his past. Ira ignited the painting mid-combat, flame leaping from her fingertips as the miasma within screamed. The chamber convulsed. Demons recoiled, walls buckled, the fire rose upwards, mercilessly. Mavlin tried to flee, but Saren drove his sword through her tapestry, severing her control. The threads unraveled. She crumbled into ash. They fled the collapsing wing as flames spread, carrying nothing but breath and resolution. So, the fire did its duty, the demons howled their last, and the echoes learned to sleep. But remember this, wanderer of tales, Miasma was never the enemy. No, it merely listened better than we did. Burn what must be burned, yes, but do not forget to sit beside the ashes. There, wisdom curls like a cat in the sun. In the farthest reaches of eastern England, where the mists cling thick about the marshes and the bells toll more for penance than for praise, there stood an ancient church cloister upon the cliffs of elm. A grim edifice of crumbling stone and leaded glass, it leaned like a hunched priest against the sea wind, and within its chill walls dwelled a sisterhood unlike any other. The people called it Sanctua Caelestis, the heavenly refuge. And to the commoners who eked out their lives in sodden hamlets nearby, it was thought a holy place, a beacon of prayer and peace in a world so oft torn by plague and the hungers of war. But to Ceres, the girl with no surname and eyes like winter sky, it was simply home. She had known no other. Her earliest memories were not of swaddling arms or lullabies, but of candle smoke and cold stone. It was said that she was brought to the cloister's gates as an infant, left wrapped in a linen shift embroidered with the sigil of a merchant family. The sisters, pale of hand and cold of voice, took her in not out of charity but because the Lord's will is a mystery, and perhaps this child was placed for our keeping. And so she grew, amid chants and psalms, under the stern watch of Mother Prudentia, abbess of the cloister, and she who spoke for God. Her hands bore calluses from scrubbing floors and her tongue seldom uttered laughter. Yet even among cloistered walls, Ceres remained bright of spirit, and her mind grew keen from the scriptures she was made to copy and recite. The other girls, silent novices clad in ashen robes, feared to befriend her too closely. For it was known, though never spoken aloud, that Ceres was the chosen child. Chosen for what, none dared ask. But sometimes, in the twilight hour, she would climb to the bell tower alone. There, with wind whipping her long flaxen hair, she would gaze toward the smoke-stained horizon and wonder, what lies beyond the sea? Beyond the forest? Beyond the whispering prayers that speak not of God but of something darker. And then, on the eve of her 16th year, the bell tolled not for Mass, but for reckoning. The bell tolled 13 times, though no bell in the Sanctua Caelestis had ever tolled beyond 12. Each strike echoed like a hammer upon bone, and with each peal, a hush deeper than prayer fell upon the cloister. Ceres had just finished scrubbing the refectory tiles, her knees sore from the cold stone, her fingers red raw. The echoes of the final bell still rang in her ribs when the shadow of Sister Angelica fell across the doorway. Angelica, she of soft step and serpent smile, spoke no word, but motioned with 2 fingers, follow. Down the long nave they passed, past statues of saints whose eyes were worn smooth, as if by centuries of weeping. The oil lamps flickered with unease, casting trembling halos upon the damp walls. Ceres tried to speak, to ask if this were some ritual she had never heard of, but Angelica silenced her with a single glance, so cold it burned. They passed beneath the great altar, behind the black tapestry of St. Oswin's martyrdom, and into the sacristy, a room forbidden to all but the abbess and her inner circle. There, 6 nuns stood in silence, hoods drawn low. One held a blindfold of black silk. Without command they seized Ceres. Struggling brought no escape, their hands were iron, and their murmurs were not prayer but incantation. The blindfold came down. Darkness swallowed her. She was carried, or perhaps floated, for how long she could not tell. Her senses blurred, the scent of mildew and candle wax, the warmth of a torch close to her skin, the distant trickle of unseen water. Steps descended beneath her feet, stone hewn roughly by hands long buried. Then, at last, she was set down. The blindfold lifted. Before her lay a chamber vast and terrible. It stretched wider than the cloister above, lit by braziers whose flames danced green and blue. Upon every wall were carvings not of saints but sigils, the crowns of nobles, crossed by weaponry, the heads of lions pierced by daggers, the emblem of the king himself, inverted. At the center stood an altar of obsidian. Upon it lay a single object, a dagger wrapped in the red sash of a royal envoy. Ceres stared, and from behind her, the abbess spoke. "The time has come, daughter of silence. You shall choose, become what we are, or perish in ignorance." Her blood turned to ice. "What are you?" she whispered, her voice barely a thread. The abbess stepped forward, unveiling her face. It was not old, not withered by time, but beautiful, like a statue of some pagan goddess forgotten by the church. "We are the choir of ashes. Once handmaidens of heaven, now the unseen hand of the king. We sing no hymns. We silence voices." She gestured to the walls, where relics hung like trophies, rings taken from noblemen, brooches encrusted with dried blood, seals of baronies long rumored to have vanished. And near the back, behind a velvet screen, Ceres glimpsed a table covered in rolled parchments bearing the sigil of the crown. "You were not left upon our doorstep by mercy, child. You were sent. The line of Thornley flows in your veins, traitors, all of them. But the king saw promise in thee. We were to raise you, cleanse you, forge you." And then, like a sudden wind upon still water, the twist came. The dagger upon the altar began to hum. Ceres felt it, not with her ears, but deep in her bones, as though the weaponry were speaking not to the room, but to her. Whispering things she could not understand, yet somehow knew to be true. She reached toward it, compelled not by command, but by some echo of her blood, and as her fingers brushed the hilt, a vision flashed across her eyes. A forest of fire. A man in black standing over a body clad in nun's robes. A city gate torn from its hinges. And at the center of it all, a girl, herself, crowned and weeping. She recoiled. "No," she said, stumbling back. "This is wrong. This is heresy." The abbess raised one finger. The nuns advanced. Ceres ran. But there were no exits. Only more shadows. That night, the wind off the sea bore no salt, no gull's cry, only silence. A silence too wide, too watchful. The cloister slept, or pretended to. Within her cell, Ceres lay upon her cot, wrists bruised, ankles sore from the ropes that had bound her after her defiance. They had returned her to her quarters, not with scorn, but with patience. As if she were not a prisoner, but a lamb yet too timid to walk the path of slaughter. "You shall see," Sister Angelica had said before closing the door. "Truth ripens with silence." But Ceres's silence ripened into resolve. She had seen too much, seen the blood-stained relics, the lies written with the king's own seal, the way the nuns bowed not in reverence, but in obedience to tyranny. Her thoughts boiled like pitch. And outside, the mist rolled in. It did not slither low as was its custom in Elm. No, this fog climbed the walls like a living thing, thick and ghost-like, swallowing torchlight and silencing even the owls. It moved with purpose. Then a knock. Not at the cloister's gate. Not at her door. No sound in stone or wood. Rather, a single rap upon the pane of her cell window, a slit of iron-grilled glass barely large enough for light. Ceres froze. Another knock, sharper. Followed by a whisper that slid into the chamber like a knife into velvet. "Thorn's daughter, wake!" She approached the window. There, barely visible through the mist, stood a figure cloaked in tattered gray. A hood masked the face, but a gloved hand pressed against the iron bars, and on the wrist, a bracelet of cursed silver, marked with 3 black thorns. Ceres knew the sigil. It belonged to the vigilance of the Hollow Crown, a secret order believed extinct. They had been the silent eyes of a king who ruled before the current tyrant. Some said they hunted lies, others that they carried them. The stranger whispered again. "You are not the first they have broken. But you must be the last." She opened her mouth, but he raised a hand. "No time. At vespers I enter. Keep low. Keep silent. When you see blood upon the censer, follow the scent of ash." And then, he was gone. No sound. No footfall. Just mist. And Ceres, breathless, her heart torn between fear and flame, knew that something had shifted. The bell tolled again. Midnight. In the chapel, the nuns gathered for their false prayers. The same chants echoed through the halls, masking secrets, cloaking rot. And into that cathedral of lies, he came. The stranger, robed now as a monk, his face obscured by the cowl, joined their ranks. No one questioned, none dared. Ceres, hidden behind the choir screen, watched his every move. The censer passed to him. He lit it. The smoke rose, not pale and sweet as incense should be, but black, sharp, with the stink of burning yew and cursed myrrh. The nuns began to cough, their voices cracking. Some collapsed. The abbess rose, her eyes wide, not with confusion, but recognition. You! Too late. The stranger threw back his hood. And the face revealed was not that of a monk, but of a knight. Weathered, one eye covered by a silver patch, a scar down his jaw like a gash in old bark. He drew a weaponry from beneath his cassock, slim, forged of grey steel veined with amber light. The chapel erupted. But Ceres did not flee. She moved as told, low, silent, guided by the scent of ash. Down, past the crypt, through the vestry, and into a hidden passage she had never known, lit by flame that crackled blue. And there she waited. Moments later, the stranger joined her, sword red, breath ragged. He did not smile. You know the truth now, he said. I need your hands. Your eyes. Your memory. Will you lead me below? Ceres hesitated, then nodded. Together they turned to the stair beneath the altar. And thus began the descent not into ruin, but into revelation. The stair was narrow and wet with the seep of ancient tears. Ceres led, the stranger at her heel, his presence close, the hiss of his breath a rhythm in the dark. Her hand clutched a torch taken from the chapel wall, its flame guttering with every step as the air grew foul. The stones here were not the smooth flagstones of the cloister but jagged shale, as though the earth itself had resisted the sanctified weight above. This passage, the knight muttered behind her, was carved before the church was ever raised. The cult built atop it, like ivy upon rot. How do you know? She whispered. He didn't answer. Not yet. They reached a heavy door, oak, bound in rusted iron. Upon its face was carved a symbol, the crowned hand, fingers severed one by one. It was the royal sigil, but perverted. A mark known in whispers among heretical circles, the seal of the Covenant of the Red Veil, once thought to be a mere tale to frighten rebellious barons. Now it burned before her, etched in truth. The knight pressed a hand to the door. Behind this lies not faith, but evidence. He drew a thin iron key from beneath his cloak and inserted it into the lock. A click, then a moan of hinges that had not moved in decades. The door opened. The torch's light stretched forth, and recoiled. For what lay beyond was a charnel library. Shelves lined the walls, each holding not scrolls or psalters, but objects, trophies, mementos, evidence. Rings of nobles long vanished, still stained. Daggers engraved with the names of men condemned in secret. Portrait miniatures cracked and weeping with mold. Parchments sealed with wax bearing the king's signet, hundreds of them. Gods! Ceres gasped, stepping inside. This is treason, the knight said. Not by us, but by them. He pointed to a tall case at the far end of the chamber. That is what we need. Inside, sealed behind glass, was a scroll longer than a man's height. Its title, Decree of Nullification, 17th year of His Majesty's rule. And beneath it, the royal seal, and the countersignature of Abbess Prudentia. It was a punishment list. Not of enemies, but of allies. Nobles who had opposed the king's early rise, then supported him, but was captured secretly, their lands seized, their bloodlines silenced. One name struck Ceres like a weaponry. Thornley. Her breath stopped. My blood! The knight's voice softened. Your father was not a traitor, Ceres. He was a shield. They shattered him because he would not bow. But before she could speak further, a tremor passed through the floor. Footsteps. Not just one. Many. They've found the bodies, the knight hissed. We must flee. Ceres lunged forward, smashed the glass with the hilt of her torch, and snatched the scroll. The knight grabbed 3 others, then lit the edge of a hanging tapestry. Cover our escape. The flames leapt high, smoke curling into screams as it kissed the ceiling. They fled back through the passage, the knight sealing the door behind them just as boot falls rang down the stairs. They ran, through crypt and corridor, past walls that seemed to lean closer with every step. At last, they reached the outer cloister, the mist still thick, but now it danced with sparks as fire bled from the chapel's upper floor. They passed the outer gates, now unguarded. The nuns, it seemed, were no longer singing. The wind tasted of burning books and broken oaths. To the capital, the knight said, mounting a waiting horse. There these lies must be made known. And you? She asked. He turned to her, his eye glinting beneath the moon. I am already. Don't worry about me and the records of the crown. Let them fear the ghost they made. And together they rode. But as the cloister faded into the distance, Ceres felt the weight of something new, a bond between them. Not yet love, but something older. A shared war. The night air carried a taste of copper, metallic, sharp. As Ceres and the knight galloped westward, the fires of Sanctua Caelestis faded behind them, their red glow clinging to the horizon like a warning unheeded by the world. Her fingers gripped the reins until her knuckles paled. Her thoughts were a storm. They rode in silence, save for the wind and the soft clink of steel beneath the knight's cloak. Though he bore no banner, no crest, his presence had changed in the hours since their escape. No longer was he merely a shadowy rescuer. There was purpose now in every movement, and beneath his silence lay a tension sharp as unsheathed iron. "What is your name?" she had asked once, during a lull. He did not look at her. "You may name me later. If we survive." It was near dawn when the towers of Caer Riston loomed into view, its walls blackened with time, its battlements jagged as broken teeth. The city, nestled in the bend of a great river, was a place of whispers and opulence, where secrets passed more freely than bread. From a distance, it looked asleep. But as they drew closer, unease took root. The city gates stood open, but not welcoming. The torchlight that usually flickered from the towers was gone. No merchant carts clustered the causeway. No guards idled by the moat, playing dice or muttering complaints. It was too still. The knight reined in his mount atop a ridge. "They know." Ceres's mouth went dry. "Know what?" "That the relics are gone. That their lies have escaped the cloister. They've sent hunters." And sure enough, from the shadows of a side gate emerged 4 figures, 2 clad in the ceremonial black and crimson of the king's own, and 2 others in plain robes, but with the eyes of men accustomed to command. "State your names," one called. "Declare your allegiance and open your satchels." The knight's hand drifted to his belt. Not to his weaponry. To a small medallion, an old thing, engraved with the image of a hooded serpent. He held it for only a breath before turning to her. "Listen to me. No. You must. I cannot go with you. If they find us both, the documents will be lost. The truth will be defeated." Karis shook her head, her eyes wet with rage. "Then we will fight." He smiled, and in that smile was the sadness of 1,000 warriors who never returned. "You will ride. Now." Then he charged. It was not a cry of rage, but of command, a voice trained in old wars, now loose like thunder. His horse leapt down the hill, hoofs cracking stone. The soldiers shouted, one raising a horn. Steel sang. The knight's weaponry met the first guard with a spray of sparks, his momentum cleaving through shield and arm. The second drew steel, only to fall with a single blow to the knee and another to the throat. But the horn, it sounded. A mournful wail that echoed over hill and gate, awakening the garrison. Ceres kicked her heels to her mare's flanks. Through the chaos she rode, through blood and noise, past the clash of steel and the scream of wounded horses. She did not look back, though her soul ached to. She heard his last shout, muffled by the gates, and then silence. The city swallowed her. She rode until the cobbles of the lower district cracked beneath her mount's hoofs. Dawn crept up the alley walls. No soul stirred. The city slumbered in a fevered hush. Her horse, foam-flecked and trembling, gave one last push and collapsed near an old well. Ceres stumbled from the saddle, cradling the scrolls to her chest. Her knees buckled. She fell to the gutter, heart hammering, breath torn from her lungs like pages from a book. He was gone. She was alone. And somewhere behind her, they were coming. The cobbled street lay crooked and silent, like a snake baking beneath the newborn sun. Ceres rose from the gutter on trembling limbs, the scrolls pressed against her breast, their waxen seals still unbroken. Her cloak clung to her skin, soaked with sweat, grime, and fear. The lower quarter of Kairistan smelled of old rain, sour ale, and a deeper rot that clung to the mortar between stones. Doors remained shut. Curtains twitched at her passing. Rats scurried in the periphery, fat from feasts that no one spoke of. She had no coin, no allies, and no name to call her own in this city of masks. But her feet knew where to go. Not because she remembered the path, but because something deeper stirred in her bones. Instinct. Inheritance. The scent of a street vendor's stew, the chipped gargoyle on a tenement wall, a faded mural of St. Audwin, each stirred something beneath memory. Until she stood before it, a crooked door, marked not with a sign, but with scratched runes only a desperate soul would notice. One eye of the door's wooden lion was missing. Ceres raised a hand, but before she could knock, it opened. And there stood a woman of 50 winters, her face creased by years of sorrow, not time. Her hair, once dark, was now shot through with ash-gray strands. Her eyes, the same pale storm blue as Ceres's, locked upon the girl and widened. "You," the woman whispered. "No, it cannot." Ceres stepped back, heart thundering. "Do I know you?" The woman reached forward, fingers trembling, not to touch but to feel the space between them. "Your name," it was Ceres. Ceres of the cloth. "I was raised by nuns," Ceres said. "At Sanctua Caelestis." The woman's hand went to her mouth. Tears began to fall. She stepped aside. "Come inside. Before they see." The home was humble. 2 rooms, the scent of dried lavender and damp wood, a cracked shrine to St. Aelwyn in the corner. A kettle hissed over a low fire. Ceres sat, offered nothing but a rough-woven towel to clean her face. The woman, her mother she now knew, paced the room like a soul trapped between worlds. "There was plague," the woman said. "You were a babe, barely able to speak. Your father had already fallen, and the city turned to ash. I could not feed you. I had to choose between watching your torment and those who could offer bread and shelter. You gave me to them," Ceres said, the words like gravel in her mouth. "To murderers. To liars." The woman sank to her knees. They were not yet corrupted. Not fully. Not then. And I thought, when the sickness passed, I would come for you. But by then, the cloister had changed. No one came out. And the guards who stood at the road bore royal crests. I dared not. Ceres stared at the flame. "He's gone," she whispered. "A man came to free me. We fled together. He stayed behind to let me pass." The woman nodded slowly. "You speak of the one-eyed knight. He came here once. Months ago. Asked questions. Paid me with a ring that bore your father's crest." She reached beneath a loose brick and pulled out a ring, silver, plain, but marked with a single blue stone. Ceres took it. Her fingers closed around it like a fist. "I have to get him back. They took him. And if they break him, then the truth is lost," her mother said, rising to her feet. "But I know one who can help." She reached for her cloak. "There is a guard at the prison gates. He owes me more than coin. He once took life a man with his own weaponry, and I buried the deed. For my silence, he swore he would one day serve me. Ceres stood. Take me to him. And as they stepped into the light of day, a mother and daughter bound by secrets and guilt either knew the next weaponry of fate was already raised. They moved through the alleyways like shadows fleeing the sun. Ceres and her mother, whose name, she now learned, was Mira, kept low beneath the broken eaves of butcher shops and shuttered inns. Caer was waking, and with it, the danger. The guard Mira had spoken of dwelled in the Garnal Quarter, a district wedged between the southern wall and the slaughterhouses. It was a place of foul smells and fouler reputations, where coin bought silence more often than it bought bread. The road narrowed until it was more a crevice than a street. "His name is Harlan," Mira said, as they approached a crumbling archway painted with drying blood. "He once took life in rage. A brawl. A gambler. That secret bought me loyalty." They descended a stairway that led beneath an old tanner's shop. At the bottom, behind a rusted iron door, was a single knock, two short, one long. The door opened. The man behind it was a bear of a figure, bald, scarred. One eye was lost, but why, no one knew. But when he saw Mira, he softened. Like a dog shown the hand of its first master. "You're late," he growled. "I'm owed." He studied Ceres, then the satchel on her hip. "That's why you came?" "No," Mira said. "She came to free a prisoner." The man stepped aside. Inside was no guardroom, but a dimly lit chamber lined with chains and old weapons. From a back passage, the stench of damp and despair oozed like a second air. "You speak of the one-eyed knight." "Aye. They brought him in 2 hours past. Shackled, hooded. He's in stone cell 5. Ceres stepped forward. "Can you get us there?" "Not unnoticed. But I can unlock the way." He led them through a maze of underground tunnels, part of the old catacombs that predated the city's current prison. At every junction he paused, listening. In the dark, Ceres could feel the weight of the city above her, its laws, its lies, its people utterly unaware of the truths buried beneath their feet. At last, they reached a hatch. "Beyond this place is the interrogation corridor," Harlan said. "Now it's used for prisoners who are too dangerous to talk about. He's there. But you have 10 minutes, maybe less." He handed Ceres a key wrapped in black leather. "This will open his shackles. Be fast." Ceres looked to her mother. Mira simply nodded. "Go." Stone cell 5 was less a cell than a tomb. Moisture dripped from the ceiling. The knight hung by the wrists, arms spread, back bowed. His head was hooded, his breath shallow but present. "It's me," Ceres whispered, slipping beneath the chains. She unlocked the first shackle, then the second. He crumpled forward, but she caught him, her fingers pressed to the ring of blue on his hand. "You came," he muttered. "I never left." But even as they embraced, the sound of boots rang down the corridor. Harlan's voice bellowed in warning. "Run!" And run they did. Through torchlit halls and up the stairs, through forgotten doors and into the breathless dawn. Ceres and the knight, bruised but breathing, emerged into the capital once more. Freedom, for now, was theirs. But the price had yet to be paid. The sun rose heavy over Caer. Its light spilled gold upon rooftops, but the streets below remained gray and tight-lit, as if the city itself feared to speak. From the rooftops to the shadowed plazas, eyes watched, some with curiosity, others with dread. For word had spread, 2 figures had emerged from the underways of the Garnal Quarter, bearing secrets dark enough to blacken the crown. Ceres and the knight stood in the Meyerhart Square, the oldest part of the capital. The stones beneath their feet were worn smooth by centuries of wheels and blood, and upon the eastern wall stood the Wordstone Pillar, a place where oracles once prophesied, now forgotten beneath banners of taxation and silence. They chose that place not by strategy, but instinct. By the time the scrolls were unfurled, laid open upon the pedestal of the old pillar, a crowd had gathered. First beggars. Then smiths. Then soldiers, merchants, even cloaked nobles who claimed no allegiance. The knight stepped forward. His voice was roughened by punishment, his limbs yet stiff from shackles, but when he spoke, the words rang like hammers upon the city's bones. I come not with sword, but truth. For years your oaths were twisted, your tithes taken to feed rich, your friends vanished in the night. All in the name of peace, but truly for power. Ceres held up the first scroll. Its wax melted in the morning sun, dripping like blood. This is the king's own order, she cried. Countersigned by Abbess Prudentia. It names 30 houses, 30, extinguished not for rebellion, but for hesitation. For mercy. For honor. Murmurs spread. Disbelief at first. Then anger. One voice shouted, Lies! Another, Prove it! And then, proof came. From the edge of the crowd stepped Mira, Ceres's mother, flanked by 2 merchants and an old knight in rusted mail. They carried more scrolls, ones hidden beneath floorboards, behind chapel walls, in forgotten crypts. Witnesses stepped forth. And suddenly the lie unraveled. People wept. Cursed. Raised fists. Then, clarions sounded. The royal guard had arrived. But too late. For the square erupted not in retreat, but in uprising. Stones flew. Torches lit. The banners of the king were torn from windows and trampled beneath boots and hooves alike. And somewhere in the storm, the knight turned to Ceres. You began this. We began this, she said. Then came the sound of horns, not the king's, but from the southern gate, where the forgotten lords returned with banners of old loyalty. The city burned, and was reborn in fire. The palace at the city's heart, once a symbol of majesty, now stood silent behind its ivory walls. Within, the king of Sablethorn paced beneath his vaulted chamber, robes dragging like shadows, his crown twisted ever so slightly upon his brow, not from weariness, but from fear. For the people no longer whispered. They shouted. The uprising in Mirehart Square had spread like fire on parchment. The scrolls were real. The names were true. And those who had once bowed now carried swords. The king summoned his master of cloaks. They cannot be allowed to reach the inner hall, the king hissed. They are already there, the master replied. The king turned, eyes wide. Then we ride. Meanwhile, beyond the inner gates, Ceres stood atop the steps of the Chamber of Decrees, her hand clutching the final scroll, the one signed in the king's own hand condemning innocence for silence. Beside her, the knight held the city's banner, not the one of black rose and iron, but the old standard, green and gold, woven with the mark of a just ruler. You must speak, he said. Only your voice can end this without drowning the square in blood. Ceres stepped forward. People of Kairistan, she cried. Your king runs from truth. He fed upon silence, wore lies like armor, and buried those who spoke against him beneath altars and prayers. The crowd thundered. But now you speak. You rise. You choose. From the distant tower, a horn sounded. The gates to the inner keep flung wide. And from within, the king himself fled, no guards, no crown, only a dark steed and a satchel of gold. He galloped westward, toward the mountain roads, leaving behind his throne, his banners, and his reign. No one followed. No one called his name. He was simply gone. The fires in the capital smoldered low, and from the ashes rose questions louder than swords. The king was gone, fled with gold and shame, and the people stood in a square once ruled by silence. The knight stood beside Ceres, blood crusted on his sleeve, a banner still in his hand. The old banners, those of rightful rule, were hoisted again. Not with triumph, but with trembling purpose. Ceres stepped into the inner hall of the citadel, where once kings had plotted in velvet shadows. Now the doors swung wide to the people. The throne loomed before her, tall, gilded, cold. Not empty. Waiting. She turned to the knight. This was never the plan, she said. Plans end. Truth begins, he answered. The council, such as it remained, old lords who had survived, merchant voices once silenced, gathered. One of them, a lady draped in the violet of House Ibrin, stepped forward. "You carry the blood of Thornley," she said. "You carry the will of the people. We will follow you." Saris looked down at her palms, still lined with soot. She closed her eyes. Then she sat. Not as a queen in glory, but as a woman in burden. The knight knelt before her. The people in the square fell to silence. And thus was born a new dawn, not with song, but with solemn vow. To never again let prayer become weaponry. To never again let truth be buried in shadow. To rule not with fear, but with remembrance. In the fortnight before All Hallows' Eve, when Greenwood Vale lay clad in russet and gold, the shepherds upon Highmoor Hill beheld a sight that set their very hearts adrift. At dawn's first blush, the flock of black-faced youths stood huddled in a silent circle, their eyes wide as if gazing upon some unseen terror. Not a bleat disturbed the autumn hush, even the wind paused, as though in whispered counsel with the unseen. By mid-morning, the sheep had vanished, tracks led neither to bracken nor brook, and no ewes' bleached bones marked their passing. Only a single, coal-black feather lay where once they had grazed. That same eve, old Bryn the miller's son, whose laughter once rang clear as a chapel bell, dreamt a dream so vivid that he awoke with pallid cheeks and a trembling hand. He told the villagers he had walked beneath a sky of ebon glass, where innumerable faces peered down, faces of the lost, the broken, and the damned. A sorrowful child among them held out a single thorned rose, its petals wilted, its stems slick with dew of blood. When dawn broke, Bryn's right eye bore a single scarlet tear that could neither be wiped nor washed away. As word of these wonders spread to Briar's Cross, the local scribe, Master Edwin, unearthed an aged parchment from the vaults of St. Cecilia's Priory. Its margin bore a marginalia, scribbled in ink as dark as raven's wing, warning of the night of endless vigil, a curse born of grief left unanswered and debts owed to forgotten spirits. Yet the parchment's script dissolved to ash between Edwin's fingers, leaving only a stench of brimstone on his breath. Meanwhile, at the manor of Lord Hawkridge, his daughter Lady Isolde began waking each midnight, her chamber candles guttering though no wind stirred. She spoke of a phantom minstrel who strummed a harp of bone, singing laments that curdled the marrow. Each dawn, her pale fingers traced rune-like burns upon the harp's strings, the very instrument she had never possessed. Lord Hawkridge, a man of stern countenance and iron will, dismissed his daughter's tale as maiden's fancy. Yet when he too was found pacing the gallery at dawn, his lantern swinging like a lantern-strung gallows, even his iron will began to crack. In the court of King Aldric, these omens reached the ears of the Magister Royal Bibliothecarius, Mistress Helena the Wise. She pored over the royal annals and found that, once in a century, at the turning of leaves to frost, the boundary between our world and that of shadow hiccuped, allowing stray sorrowful spirits to wander the living realm. Yet no such passage had ever been recorded in memory. To Helena, this portended an unraveling of the natural order, an omen that sleep itself might be stolen. Thus did Greenwood Vale shudder at these portents, sheep vanished by moonlight, dreams harrowing as the grave, songs that charred the body, and ancient writs turning to ash. Beneath these omens lay a darker truth. Some debt, some sorrow unatoned, had called forth a power older than mortal ken. And in that fragile hour before the plague of wakefulness, the realm trembled, unaware that the first tremors of its curse had already begun. Elspeth, daughter of Rowan, was known among the folk of Briar's Cross for her laughter, bright as wind chimes in summer, and for her gentle hands that coaxed herb and blossom from reluctant soil. She dwelt with her widowed father at the border of the elder woods, in a cottage whose chimney always bore the scent of sage and chamomile. Though poor in coin, they were rich in kindness, and many a villager sought Elspeth's aid when colic struck babes or old wounds flared. On the eve of the hunter's moon, Elspeth walked the dew-damp fields alone, drawn by a song she could not name. The notes drifted from the trees soft and dolorous. She followed without thought, her feet moving of their own accord, until she reached a fallen standing stone, a relic so ancient none now remembered its name. There she found a single black feather lying upon the stone, still quivering though no breeze blew. The moment her fingers touched it, a strange stillness settled upon the land. The song ceased. The birds held their tongues. Even the crickets, who chirped despite the woes of kings, fell silent. Elspeth blinked once, and when she opened her eyes the sky was darker, the moon veiled behind clouds. She returned home in a daze, feather clenched in her palm, and did not speak a word that night. The next morn, Rowan found his daughter still awake, seated at the hearth with a candle burned down to a nub. Her eyes were wide and dry, her gaze unblinking. He asked if she had slept, and she shook her head, saying only, "There are voices in the silence, and they whisper of eyes that never close." He dismissed it as a passing fever. Yet 3 nights passed, then 5, and Elspeth did not sleep. Her flesh grew pale as ashwood, her once bright laughter faded into silence. She began to mutter strange things in the tongue of dreams, naming stars not seen since the age of stone, speaking of doors that open in the mind when the body refuses rest. Her shadow, once faithful, began to lag behind her as though it walked to a different rhythm. One night the village healer Mistress Bruna visited, bringing tincture of black poppy and bitterroot. Elspeth drank deeply, but sleep eluded her. Instead, her eyes rolled back, and she screamed in a voice not her own. "They are awake beneath the world! And now, so must we be!" That eve, the dogs of Briar's Cross howled as one, and every mirror in the village cracked down its center. Soon after, the curse began to ripple outward. A farmer, who had helped Rowan harvest barley, awoke one night to find his bed empty. He had been walking the moors in his sleep, eyes wide, murmuring the names of forgotten gods. The village bell ringer stopped ringing at noon, claiming the tolling summons something he could not name. Even the cattle grew restless, eyes bloodshot, pacing within their stalls without end. Elspeth's condition worsened. Her skin grew translucent, her breath shallow. Yet through it all, her mind remained razor-sharp. She began to draw in the dirt with her fingers, strange glyphs that glowed faintly under moonlight, vanishing by dawn. Rowan wept, but she only smiled faintly and said, "I am the first candle, father. The wind comes to claim them all." What was it that touched her that night by the standing stone? What ancient force crept from beyond the veil, bearing the black feather of insomnia? None knew. But one thing was clear, the plague had begun. Sleep, that most sacred balm of mortals, was no longer safe. In the first week following Elspeth's affliction, the good folk of Briar's Cross rallied with honest intent. Mistress Bruna, grey-haired and iron-spined, returned with stronger draughts, poppy tinctures aged in moonlight, valerian root crushed beneath a waxen gibbous, and milk steeped with the petals of dream hazel, a rare bloom said to open only when lullabies are sung at midnight. Each night, Rowan coaxed Elspeth to drink, and each night she sat silent, unmoved by his trembling voice. Her eyes stared into something not of this world, something flickering at the corners of sight, too dreadful to name. When the healers failed, the villagers turned to the chapel. Father Callum, young and untried, lit every candle before the altar and read from the ancient psalter of the drowsing saint, whose verses once lulled crusaders into peaceful sleep amidst war. He anointed Elspeth's brow with oil of myrrh and bade the bell ring at twilight, that angels might descend to cradle her weary soul. Yet even as the bell tolled, strange things occurred. The church's great window, depicting Saint Irenia dreaming beneath the stars, clouded with frost despite the hearth's blaze. The flame upon the altar candle curved sideways as if recoiling. And Elspeth, sweet, sleepless Elspeth, laughed once softly in a voice too old to be hers. Saints do not enter where the night has fed. Others tried their own charms. The twin midwives, Agda and Lyres, buried a linen doll filled with sage and lavender beneath Elspeth's bed, as was done in old times to ward off wraiths. Yet when they returned 3 nights hence, they found the doll hanging from the rafters by its own hair, its stitched eyes weeping black sap. Even the skeptical tried their hand. Cobbler Juan, who never set foot in chapel nor gave coin to the almsbox, scrawled ancient runes on her doorstep using blood from a white rooster. He claimed the signs would snarl the devil's path. But the next morning, Juan was found sleepwalking in the graveyard, speaking backwards in a tongue no living soul had heard. And all the while, Elspeth remained awake. Not simply conscious, nay, aware. She began to speak of dreams not her own. She knew when old Marta's grandson had nightmares of drowning, and whispered word for word the rhyme that haunted him. She recited lines from lost tomes that no peasant could know. Once she turned to Father Callum and asked, "Does it trouble thee, priest, that the god of sleep is older than the god of light?" He fled the room, pale and trembling. The village began to split. Some believed she was cursed, others that she was a seer. A few whispered darker things, that she had been chosen by something slumbering in the bones of the earth. None dared exile her, for fear of what might follow. Then came the night of falling lanterns. During the harvest fair, the villagers hung paper lanterns in the square, a tradition to honor the changing of seasons. Yet at midnight, every lantern burst into flame, not with heat, but with cold, blue fire that gave no warmth. And from the flickering light, shadows crept, not cast from any living being, but moving on their own, like memories made flesh. They danced silently about the square, circling the villagers, whose feet froze and tongues failed. When dawn came, all who had beheld the shadows found their sleep broken, their nights restless. The curse had grown. Elspeth was no longer alone. Mistress Bruna, with tears upon her craggy cheeks, declared it. "This is no sickness of body, nor even of mind. The veil that guards us in sleep is torn, and something watches from the other side." And so the people of Briar's Cross, once a merry, song-filled hamlet, fell into silence. Dreams became battlegrounds, and rest a myth. Though their limbs ached and eyes burned, none found peace. Some began to say they no longer knew what sleep felt like. Others claimed they were forgetting what dreams even were. And Elspeth? She no longer spoke often. But when she did, she whispered riddles in the voice of a far-off bell. When the mind forgets how to wander, the soul forgets where to return. It began quietly. Always, it begins so. A fortnight after the lantern's ill omen, the oxherd Jarn returned from the eastern pastures mumbling of laughter that rose from beneath the earth. He claimed it followed him across the hill, never nearer, never fading. When questioned, he blinked, puzzled, and said he hadn't slept in days, not due to fear, but because the mere notion of sleep had fled his mind. "I lie down, but I don't remember how to close my eyes," he whispered. "My lids, they resist me." Not long after, his wife awoke screaming, swearing her dreams had turned into a single, endless corridor lined with mirrors that reflected not herself, but others who stared back, tapping on the glass, smiling without warmth. At first, the village believed it no more than shared hysteria, a fever of the soul wrought by Elspeth's eerie plight. But the symptoms did not stop. The baker's apprentice, once hale and loud-voiced, was found one morning chewing parchment as though it were bread, eyes wide, his hands scrawling nonsense symbols on the shop wall. "I dream in waking now," he muttered. "The sleeper watches from the folds of the sky." Even the venerable Bishop Milton, who had come from Ireford to bring ecclesiastical comfort, found himself afflicted. A man once serene, who claimed sleep like a hound claims a hearth, began to twitch and mutter during Massachusetts. His sermons grew fragmented, his voice rising in tones more chant than speech. He began to walk the chapel at night, placing his hands upon the walls and whispering, "They are inside. The walls remember. They wish us to wake." By week's end, he locked himself in the sacristy, scratching star maps onto the floorboards with his own fingernails. When they broke through the door to save him, he was gone, vanished as if swallowed by shadow, his robes arranged in the shape of a six-pointed spiral. A council was called by candlelight in the village long hall. There, the villagers, hollow-eyed, jittery, wild with unrest, argued on what was to be done. Some called for burning Elspeth, claiming she had become a beacon for dark forces. Others insisted on fleeing to the walled city of Westminster, to seek aid from the Arcane College or the Order of Dreambinders. Yet before they could agree, every candle in the hall extinguished at once. In the smothering dark, a voice was heard, not loud, but clear. A woman's voice, melodic and strange, spoke in the old tongue of the Barrow folk, long thought extinct. The boundary is memory. The waking shall forget. The dreaming shall hunger. When the lights returned, many had collapsed in seizures. Some could no longer speak, their minds retreating inward. One child aged 10 years overnight, his hair turned white, his eyes distant as stars. Even the animals were not spared. The horses refused their stables, ramming doors and screaming like men. The dogs ceased barking, and some were found staring at blank walls for hours. Crows circled the bell tower, never landing, cawing in disharmonious rhythm, as if mocking a funeral dirge. Panic took root. Some villagers tried fleeing in the night. Few returned. One boy, sent ahead to Westminster, came back 4 days later, though the road was 2 days distant each way. He was silent, bore no injuries, but his mouth twitched endlessly, as though murmuring prayers in reverse. He never spoke again, only wept when the sun set. Then, from the forest, figures were seen. Pale things, with long limbs and lidless eyes. They moved not in shadow, but as shadows, appearing where light faltered, hovering at the edge of lanterns' glow. Elspeth, when told, only said, "They are the dreamless. The price of stolen sleep." Fear became the village's only constant. And with fear came transformation. Some began to hoard candles, obsessively keeping light in every room. Others filled their homes with bells, believing sound could ward off the creeping silence. A few turned to strange rituals, cutting symbols into their arms to stay alert, boiling bones for tea, burning feathers by starlight. Madness and despair became the new gods of Briar's Cross. And yet, amidst it all, Elspeth sat in her cottage, unmoving, her eyes aglow with the light not of this earth. She no longer needed food, nor water. Her skin shimmered faintly beneath moonlight, and when she did speak, it was in tongues unknown to anyone. She was no longer afflicted. She was becoming something else. 'Twas in the 3rd month of sleeplessness when the villagers ceased counting days. The sun still rose and set, but none marked the hours, for their minds unraveled like frayed cloaks. Those who once toiled by the rhythm of dawn and dusk now sat idly in doorways, muttering to walls. Farmers forgot their fields, their crops withered unharvested. Children ceased to play. No hammer rang in the forge, no flute played in the square. The few who could still speak of it said there were 2 nights now, one in the sky, and one beneath their eyes. A blackness behind their gaze, from which shapes emerged when they blinked too long. Some claimed these shapes spoke, others that they watched. A few began to claw at their own faces, desperate to silence the unseen gaze behind their minds. Rowan, Elspeth's father, became but a shell of a man. He no longer pleaded with his daughter, nor fed her. He merely sat in the threshold of their cottage, staring into the forest, his hands twitching in rhythm with some inner music. Once, he rose and walked barefoot into the woods. He returned 3 days later, clothes torn, hair full of thorns, holding nothing but a cradle made of bones. When asked, he simply said, "The sleepless cradle the world now." That same week, 4 villagers vanished. Their doors remained locked from within. In their beds lay only pillows shaped like their bodies and one word carved into the headboards in perfect script: "Awakened." And yet the village endured, if one can call it so. Too afraid to leave, too weary to organize, too confused to resist, they huddled together, watching the walls, the windows, the stars. Then, at last, word reached the capital. A tanner's apprentice, one of the few unaffected, or at least unbroken, escaped the village under the guise of night. Guided by the stars and his grandmother's old charms, he stumbled into the court of King Aldric, gaunt and shaking, and fell at the king's feet muttering, "The dark steals the dream, and the dream steals the soul." At first, the courtiers scoffed. Talk of hauntings and sleepless madness had passed before, and many a tale had proved naught but rumor. But when the lad's skin began to flake away in the light, their laughter turned to dread. King Aldric, aged though still resolute, summoned his council. The archsage of the royal arcanum, Lady Talia of Dunhollow, examined the boy and declared, "This is no madness. This is transmutation. His soul has been rewoven by a force that defies sleep, and thus defies mortality." The king's eyes darkened, and he rose. It had been a generation since the last true threat to the realm, the Wyvern Rebellion, when fire rained from the sky and beasts danced in courtly halls. Aldrich had grown tired in the years of peace, yet now his voice rang as of old. "If sleep itself be cursed, then what remains of man? We shall send a sword into the darkness." Thus did he call upon a knight most rare, Sir Gideon the Stalwart, hero of the Cindergate Wars, whose sword had sundered the gates of fire, and whose heart had never once faltered, not even before the weeping queen's mirror. Gideon, grizzled and solemn, listened without a word as the king spoke of dreams undone and spirits unstilled. When asked if he would go, he merely bowed. "I have walked through fire and faced my fears. But now I must face what lies beyond them." He was given no army, no host, only a map, a war-horse named Valor, and a single companion, the Arcanum's lantern-bearer, a mute girl named Syrah whose eyes glowed faintly in darkness and who spoke only through glyphs traced in air. They rode out on the first night of the new moon. Gideon's path wound through abandoned hamlets where straw dolls hung from trees, through forests where the owls watched by day and the foxes wept at night. The world was not right. Dreams, he felt, were not merely gone from Briar's Cross, they were unraveling everywhere. In the Riverlands he found a chapel whose acolytes crying, "Sleep is but the curtain before the greater lie." In a wayside inn, he drank with a merchant who had not slept in weeks, yet remained lucid. When asked how he endured, the man smiled and replied, "I sold my dreams for gold. It buys clarity, but not rest." The road narrowed. The trees grew strange, leaves of ivory, branches that bled amber sap. Syrah began to tremble when they crossed a stream where the water flowed upward, and voices could be heard if one listened too long. And all the while, Briar's Cross waited, its folk thinner, more brittle, their minds fraying like worn lace. Elspeth, once the first victim, now sat atop her cottage roof each dusk, eyes fixed skyward. She no longer blinked. Her breath was steady, her voice low and distant. "They come when sleep goes away," she said to no one. And sleep went away. Greystone Keep lay east of the vale, perched like a crow upon the jagged cliffs of Widow's Crest. Once a fortress of learning, it had fallen to ruin after the War of Fractured Crowns. Only one soul now dwelt within its lichen-strangled halls, Mistress Aurelia, last alchemist of the Moonlight Order, a woman whispered of in courts and taverns, revered by sages, feared by priests. Sir Gideon and Syrah reached the keep beneath a sky thick with cinders. No fire had burned, yet the clouds were the color of ash, and a faint scent of charred parchment clung to the wind. The great gate, wrought of stone and etched with alchemical sigils, opened at their touch, though none came to greet them. They found Aurelia in the tower's highest chamber, seated before a cauldron of silver fire. Her hair was a tangled mass of white, her robes stitched with symbols that shifted when one looked too long. Her eyes, one sapphire, one a glimmering disk of molten gold, peered at Gideon with something like recognition. "I knew you would come," she said, her voice like wind stirring dry leaves. "The curse has no cure, but its root may be burned." Gideon bowed low. "Tell me what you know, mistress, for time grows thin, and sleep vanishes like mist." Aurelia rose and gestured to her shelves, lined with tomes bound in crystal. "It is no plague, brave knight. It is a reckoning. Sleep is a gift, yes, but also a chain. It binds our souls to this world, protects us from what waits beyond dreams. That chain has been shattered." She spoke then of the first sleeper, an entity older than gods, who once wrapped the world in forgetful slumber to shelter it from madness. But something, some sorrow, some grievance unhealed, had awoken the sleeper's enemies, the Veil-born. "The Veil-born," she whispered, "are not demons nor ghosts. They are the absence of rest, the hunger of memory unending. They dwell between the ticks of time, in the cracks of lullabies. They have returned, and they unmake sleep to draw forth the souls they covet." It was Elspeth, Aurelia said, who became the fulcrum. She had brushed against a slumbering wound when she touched the black feather, one of the Veilborn's forgotten messengers. Her mind, sensitive and kind, open like a flower to their touch. Through her, they found the world vulnerable. But there is hope still, Aurelia intoned, drawing forth a bundle wrapped in dream silk. Within it lay a map, not of roads or towns, but of thoughts. This, she explained, is the dream path, a route through memory and nightmare that leads to the moors of Whispering Oaks, where lies the Veil of Stars. The Veil of Stars, Aurelia explained, was woven by angels who fell not in rebellion but in sorrow. It is the only thing the veil-born cannot touch. Placing it upon the afflicted shall knit back the severed threads of sleep. But to claim it, she warned, you must pass into the dream path fully, in body and soul. The path is treacherous. It will show you your regrets, your failures, all that you flee from. You must walk it unflinching, or be lost. Gideon did not waver. I have faced sword and beast. I shall face my own soul. Syrah, silent as ever, raised her lantern, and its flame turned violet. Aurelia smiled. Then you are ready. Before they departed, Aurelia gave Gideon a phial of liquid moonlight. In case he faltered, she said, and a final warning. The Veil-born will know you are coming, and they will offer you peace. Beware it. Their peace is hollow, and their dreams are traps. As the two descended from Greystone Keep, the very stones behind them began to crack, as if the keep had given its last breath. Aurelia remained atop her tower, watching the horizon. When Gideon looked back one final time, he saw not the alchemist, but a column of flame that rose into the clouds, and from its heart, the echo of a lullaby sung in grief. The entrance to the dream path was not marked by gate or rune. It was a grove, nameless, silent, and untouched by wind, where the trees leaned inward, their bark etched with faces mid-scream, their roots entwined like lovers in anguish. The moon above the grove hung inverted, its reflection shimmering not in water, but in the very air, as though reality had been peeled back. Syrah's violet lantern flickered as they stepped beneath the arch of boughs. At once, the world around them shifted. The scent of pine and leaf was replaced by ink and memory. The air grew still, watchful, as though each breath they took stirred things just beyond sight. They walked, and the ground beneath their feet changed with every step. One moment it was cobbled stone, the next, candle-waxed floors, then wet sand that bore no footprints. All around, shapes moved in the corners of the eye, images too sharp to be imagined, too fleeting to be grasped. Then came the voices. They were not the voices of ghosts or gods, but of selves, forgotten moments, lost words, choices unmade. For Gideon, they began softly, a lullaby sung by his mother, a child's laugh that echoed from a battlefield he once survived. But soon they sharpened. "Why did you let them go at Ember Hollow?" whispered one. "You chose honor over love," hissed another. And then, a child's voice, mocking. "You are brave, but you are tired. Lay down your sword. Rest. Let it end." Gideon clenched his jaw and pressed on. They came to a great mirror lake, its surface black as obsidian, its stillness absolute. In it, Gideon saw not his reflection, but 1,000 versions of himself, young, old, maimed, crowned, broken. Each stepped forward and spoke in unison. "You are not real. You are the dream they dreamed of strength." He would have faltered then, but Syrah took his hand. Though mute, her presence was an anchor. In her gaze he saw no fear, only light. Together they stepped into the lake. They fell. Not through water, but through memories, a cascade of his life, every joy, failure, and sin. The time he spared a bandit who later robbed a village. The night he abandoned a lover for the crown's call. The moment he first held a sword and liked it. When he landed, it was upon a road made of parchment and teeth. Before him rose a door, simple oak, carved with the rune of truth. Beyond it, the final trial of the dream path awaited. Inside was a chamber of stars. Not painted, not hung, but true stars, burning in a void shaped like a room. In the center stood a throne of glass. And upon it himself, but older, worn, smiling with deep sorrow. This shade, this future, spoke gently. "You seek the veil. But it is not given. It is sacrificed. You must offer what you fear to lose most. Gideon drew his sword. What price? The figure rose. Your sleep forever? You must become its guardian. You shall wield the veil, but never know its mercy. No rest, no dream, no end. Sira stepped forward. She touched the rune upon the throne, and the stars flared. In that light, Gideon saw her truth. She had once been one of the Veil-born, but had rejected them, cutting out her own voice to silence their song within her. She offered herself. But the dream path rejected it. The price was Gideon's alone. With solemn breath, he nodded. So be it. The veil of stars descended from the heavens, a cloth of moonlight and sorrow, humming with lullabies. Gideon took it. At once sleep fled his soul. He felt it leave, like a bird loosed from its cage. He would never dream again. Yet in his hand was salvation. They emerged from the dream path at dusk. But not the dusk they had known. The sky above Briar's Cross was not painted in the gentle rose and gold of day's end. Nay, it was the hue of old bruises and burnt silk. The sun hung low but unmoving, its light pallid and uncertain. Crows circled endlessly overhead, and the village below lay still, as if holding breath. Gideon and Sira descended the hill, their every step heavier. The veil of stars pulsed gently in his satchel, a heartbeat not his own. As they passed the old boundary stone, now cracked down its center, they saw the toll of sleeplessness. The cottages stood hollow-eyed. The fields lay barren. The air itself trembled. But the worst change was not in the land, it was in the people. The villagers wandered without direction, their limbs jerking in strange rhythms, as though pulled by unseen threads. Their eyes shone with faint silver light, and they murmured to themselves, endlessly repeating fragments of lullabies and names no longer theirs. Elspeth, whispered Sira, breaking her silence with the flicker of a glyph. She stood at the center of the village square, atop the broken well. No longer merely pale, she was luminous, her skin etched with veins of faint starlight, her hair a cascade of silver ash. She no longer wept, nor smiled. She watched, everything and nothing. When she saw Gideon, she tilted her head. You've brought it, she said softly. Her voice echoed twice, once in the air, once in the minds of all present. You would close the wound. I would mend it, he replied, hand resting upon the veil. A tremor passed through the village. From the alleys and cellars, from beneath floorboards and within shadows, the Veil-born rose. They came not with shrieks or howls, but with silence. Tall, thin, and utterly wrong, limbs bending where joints should not be, eyes too wide, mouths closed yet whispering thoughts into the minds of all. They surrounded the square, and one stepped forward. It bore no face, but its presence bled sorrow. Give us the veil. Gideon stepped between Elspeth and the creatures. Never. You do not understand. This world has forgotten the price of sleep. We are its memory. We are what comes when dreams rot. Sira raised her lantern. The flame flared violet, casting a halo about Gideon. Go back to the dark, he said. You are the dark now, the faceless one replied. You traded sleep for salvation. You belong to us. The air ruptured. The Veil-born attacked, not with sword but with thought. Gideon staggered as images flooded his mind, failures, doubts, the slow erosion of purpose. They tried to unmake him with truth. But he had already faced truth. He drew his sword and moved like a storm. Each swing of his sword cleaved shadow and memory alike. Sira stood at his back, her lantern pushing back the dark. The villagers, dazed and puppet-like, began to stir. With each flash of the lantern, one awoke, free of the spell, though gaunt and haunted. Gideon reached Elspeth. She did not move. Elspeth, he called, voice breaking. You are not theirs. You are the first, be the last to fall. A flicker passed through her. Her lips parted. I remember sleep, she whispered. A tear, the first in moons, traced her cheek. Gideon unfolded the veil of stars. Its thread shimmered, and the sky above paused, the crows stilled mid-flight. He draped the veil over Elspeth. A wind unlike any mortal breeze swept through Briar's Cross. The veil glowed brighter than the sun, and the veil-born screamed, not aloud, but in the soul. They cracked and scattered, turning to smoke, fading into echoes. Then quiet. Elspeth fell into his arms, asleep at last. True blessed sleep. And then, one by one, the villagers followed. They slumped gently where they stood, breathing slow, peaceful. Even the animals, long maddened, curled and rested. The curse had broken. But Gideon remained standing, wide-eyed. The veil had worked, but his price remained. He could not follow them into dreams. Sirrah touched his arm, offering comfort. He gave a wan smile. "I guard their sleep," he said, "and I shall never wake." Thus did Sir Gideon become the watcher of dreams. He resides still in Briar's Cross, unaging, tireless, walking the fields by starlight, watching over those who sleep. He speaks little, eats less, but his eyes, though sleepless, remain kind. And the veil of stars rests in the chapel, guarded by song and silence, never to be used lightly again.